Hi students, my name is Emma Reed. I am an 8th grade math teacher, and today we are continuing your What Influences Temperature project. So our big question for today is, how can we model the relationship between temperature and latitude? We're going to think throughout this lesson about what does it mean to model a relationship from the real world with math. So let's move on to our intro/launch first part. This is just a reminder that this lesson is part of a 4-part series that will give you the opportunity to put together several of the math skills you have learned this year. Each of the 4 lessons, this is the 3rd of 4, will build on each other, and you will be asked to use information you found in one lesson to answer questions in the next. Make sure to keep a copy of the work you do today so you can refer back to it later. So now is the perfect time for you to gather your work from lessons 1 and 2 of this project and make sure you have them with you. Now we'll move on to the second part of our intro/launch. Here we are given a graph. Make sure you take a moment and read what each axis is counting or measuring. And then you're going to ask yourself, what do I notice and what do I wonder? And you'll explain your thinking in the blue rectangles. Once you've had enough time to fully explain your thinking and mention some specific details that you notice and ask at least a couple questions about what you're wondering about this graph, we'll move on to our Explore section where we're looking at some real data. So here you can see we're asking the question, what information does each row contain? So look carefully at the table and answer that question in the blue rectangle. Once you've answered this question, I want you to think about, where did you find that information? Like, where do you look in a table to make sure you know what information each row contains? Because that's something you want to remember for the future. Every time you look at a table, you want to ask yourself, what information does each row contain? How do I know? What type of numbers am I looking at? Etc. Let's move on to slide D of our Explore section. So now we're thinking, what is the range for each variable? So what are our variables? We talked about that in the previous slide. And what's the range, which is a measure of spread, or how spread out is the data. And I'm just going to do a quick example of finding the range from a table. So you'll see here I have a table where I'm measuring the height of different plants. And I have one that is 7 inches, another plant that's 8 inches, 10 inches, 5 inches, and 6 inches. So to find the range of my data, or how spread out are the heights of my plants, I would find the minimum height, which was 5 inches, and the maximum height, which was 10 inches, and I would find the difference by subtracting the smallest minimum from the largest, or maximum. And when I do 10 minus 5, I find that my range is 5 inches for my plants. You're going to apply that same logic to this table and determine the range of the variables you're given in this table. So pause, find those ranges for your variables, and when you're ready, we'll move on to slide E of our Explore section. So now we're thinking about our math modeling, right? We're asking, do you see an association between the two variables? If so, describe the association. So when mathematicians and scientists deal with data in the real world, this is a question that they ask themselves all the time. Are these variables associated? What kind of model makes sense to show that or not, right? So think, do you see an association or a connection between the variables, and describe what kind of association you see. Take your time. And when you're ready, we'll move on to slide F. Now here on slide F, we are making a scatter plot of the data. So you already tried describing any association you see on the previous slide. Now, when we make our scatter plot, it's a way of us visualizing whether or not there's an association between these variables. So as we plot our points in the graph, it's going to be easier for us to either confirm what we thought about our association in slide E, or change our minds once we see it laid out in a scatter plot. Now, if you are working in Pear Deck, you can sketch to draw your graph on this slide if you prefer. If you would like to use Desmos to create a scatter plot and then share that file with your teacher, I'm going to show you how to do that now. I would suggest that you have this table open in one screen and Desmos open in another, and so that's what I'll demonstrate. So you can see I have my table open on one side of my screen and my Desmos graphing calculator open on the right hand side, and this is just desmos.com/calculator. And the first thing I suggest you do is give your graph a title, because that way it'll save to your Desmos account. You can make one here if you don't have one already, and that way you can share that graph with your teacher when you're done. So the first thing we want to do is decide how to set up our axes, and you can base that on the minimum and maximum values you looked at before. So you already looked at the range for both of your variables. That'll give you an idea of what you want your axis to count by, what you want the minimum and maximum values to be. You can also, so you're going to do that here, right? What do you want the minimum and maximum values to be on your x-axis? Here, what do you want the minimum and maximum values to be on your y? What do you want your axis to count by? That's going to be step and step. And then you can think about, what do I want to label my x-axis? Is it going to be latitude or average high temperature in September? Same with your y, and you can type the label right here where it says add a label. And then once you've done that, you're going to add your points. So if you click this right here, you can start typing in your ordered pairs for the points you want to plot on your graph, and adjust your axes and the interval on your axes as needed. And when you're done, you already named it, so it's saved. It saves automatically, and you can share the link with your teacher. Now let's return to our slide deck so we can summarize our findings and finish our Explore section. Like I mentioned before, now that you have your graph, you have another point of justification for whether you see any patterns of association. So decide, is your answer the same as when you were just looking at the table? Did you notice something new? And describe any patterns that you notice in the blue rectangle. And then you're going to draw a line that fits the data and write an equation for that line. So you can kind of draw it in your mind if you're using the Desmos and type in the equation that you think would go with that line. Otherwise, you're using your sketch on the previous slide and you're literally drawing the line yourself. So now let's move on to our summary. And here you're going to record your response to the focus question, how can we model the relationship between temperature and latitude? And you can use the space on the right to record any notes that you want to remember. Save your work from today somewhere where you know how to find it, because we're going to close out our project with the 4th lesson in this series, and you'll need all the previous 3 lessons with you. Thank you for joining me today, and have a beautiful rest of your day.